Chapter 7. I arrived at Bill and Karen's house Wednesday morning. Bill was the only one there. He took me into his office and asked me to have a seat. I asked you to come today for several reasons. First, I want you to understand that because of the circumstances surrounding you and your discovery of the kindred, you've gotten what some people will consider special treatment. I admit, I don't treat you the way I treat most of my pack, or like I treat my own children. If I had to make a comparison, I would probably say I treat you much as one treats a beloved godchild, which is very much how I have come to see you over the years. I wanted you to be aware it may cause hard feelings with some of the rest of the pack. Second, you need to understand how the pack works, the hierarchy and structure we live within. You saw a bit of it last week with Brandon. His addressing me as Anikitos, and his deferential manner toward me. Those are only a small part of the way the pack works. So far, it looks like you'll be alphic. That means you're powerful enough, and because I know you, I can say dominant enough to be an alpha, or other high-ranking pack member. Even if you don't want to lead, alphic means that you could. You have the power and dominance. You already know a pack's leaders, Karen and I, are the Electo and Anikitos. The second-in-command titles are the Lysandros and the Harmonia. They, like the pack leaders, are generally a married couple, though it's not required. They are also earned positions. You'll be meeting Hank and Alexis tonight. There are also several other positions including Theron, which is a pack's chief enforcer, more security positions, elders and others, some necessary, some not. We do have a Theron, and though I'm sure you'll meet him, there's no need now. You also need to know Karen and I often have bodyguards around. They're part of the enforcer, or security team. You've never seen them because I've been careful around your father, and I've kept them at a distance when he's around. You and he aren't a danger to me, and I didn't want you to freak out with strangers hovering around. I'm going to have them stick around so you can get used to them. Okay. I blinked as I processed his words. There had to be more about pack structure and life that I didn't know yet, but who knew it was so complicated? There's also a lot more to the government, and basically ruling is how it's done. But you need to know Karen and I are in charge of seeing to it our pack follows the rules set down for all kitsune. Set down by whom? By the council. For now, think of the council like Congress. I don't want to give you too much information and overwhelm you. We have a little while before a couple people are coming by, so let's do something else and let the new information sink in. What do you have in mind? Have you been practicing your telepathy? Some. Brandon and I went out for a run yesterday. It was nice to be able to talk to him while in wolf form, more than just the barking and tail wagging I imagined. Where did you go? Out to the hot tub on Hakel Road. I figured there was lots of space and few people around to spot us in the middle of the afternoon on a weekday. He nodded his approval. How did you like running as a wolf? It was fun. She filled him in on the trip the day before, up until Brandon's warning about the javelina. He said even in wolf form it's best to avoid them. He was right. They're mean little buggers, and they don't care about size. Unless you want to hurt one or be hurt by one, it's best to just steer clear. Did you take anything to eat? I smiled. I'd planned ahead. I stopped on my way out of town and picked up some fruit and a few of those meal replacement shakes. They don't taste the greatest, but they worked really well, and they're better than protein bars any day. I never thought about those things, but they're a really good idea. I'll have to mention them to Karen. They would be good to add to the emergency bags we keep in our cars. Yep, they have calories and nutrients fast. Not to mention they transport and store well. We talked about my run the day before and practiced my telepathy until the doorbell rang. You stay here, I'll get that. Bill stood. I stayed where I was in the overstuffed leather chair in his office that I loved so much. Bill returned with two men following him. One looked about my age, maybe a little older. The other was a bit older than the first, but still not Bill's age. I looked up at the trio, my mind blank until Bill spoke, drawing my attention back to him. "Nickie, these are my enforcers, my security," Bill said. I pulled my feet out from underneath me and stood to meet them. "This is Terry Vaughn. He generally works evenings and nights around here." The older of the two men stepped forward. He was about 6 feet 2 inches with a short military haircut on his almost black hair, and even though it was cut short, I could tell he was starting to go gray. He was big, bulky, and muscular, like someone who did a lot of heavy lifting or spent a lot of time in the gym. His blue eyes were pleasant, and he smiled as he extended one hand toward me. I stepped closer and shook his hand. He had a firm, sure grip without being too aggressive. "Nice to meet you," he said. "You too." I was unsure what was going on. After he released my hand, Terry stepped back until he was once more standing next to the other man. "This is Gabriel Henson. You'll probably encounter him most as he has the day shift." Bill introduced the younger man. Gabriel wasn't as tall as Terry. He probably stood about 5 feet 11 inches. He was thinner too, not less muscled, just built differently. It was the long, lean muscle of a runner instead of the bulk of a football player. He looked more ethnic, with dark hair cut so he could artfully muss the top, as was done now. He had dark chocolate brown eyes, which sparkled at me over his full-lipped smile as he stepped forward. "I'm pleased to meet you too." I looked up at him as I shook his hand. "The pleasure's all mine, I'm sure," he said in a slow, deep voice. The strength in his hand was apparent as he carefully clasped mine in his. After he released my hand, he stood for a moment, just gazing at me. It felt like he was trying to figure something out. After a moment, he stepped back and was once again standing beside Terry, as though nothing had happened. "Boys, this is Nickie Daniels. She shifted for the first time last week. She's brand new to our secret, and she's still learning about the kindred." Instantly, all pretense of relaxed comfort fell from the men. They seemed to stand taller and be generally tougher. Without a word between them, they moved to stand on either side of Bill. They were alert and ready to face anything that might threaten their leader. Their actions made Bill's words earlier more real. They weren't only there to enforce the rules as their titles implied. Wow, they really seemed to take the bodyguard thing seriously. Then it dawned on me. Bill saying that I've only recently shifted is what had put them on alert. That means they think I'm a threat. I couldn't help myself, I had to speak up. "I realize you're just doing your job, but I find the insinuation that I'm a threat insulting. I would never do anything to hurt Bill or Karen." I let my displeasure show in my voice. Confusion flashed in their eyes when I used names instead of titles, but I had to give them credit. They never wavered from their position and determination to defend Bill. "Stand down, boys. You can relax. Nickie's no threat. I've known her all her life and she's like my goddaughter. I wanted to make introductions so you'd recognize her, and she wouldn't be surprised if she stopped by and found one of you here." The two men relaxed some. They were still wary, but not at attention and on alert like before. "Nickie still has a lot to learn about being kindred. I thought if you could get along with her, you might help teach her about living among the kindred. The more people she feels comfortable asking things, the sooner she'll feel more like one of us. If they don't treat me like I'm going to attack you, I'm willing to give it a try," I said to Bill. "You have to understand," Terry spoke up, "you're an unknown in an unfamiliar situation, going through major changes you couldn't possibly have expected. High emotions and stress can lead to aggressive or violent behavior. As far as we know, you may not be handling things well and could be a danger to our aniquitos." I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, trying to organize my thoughts. "I understand your position, but I won't put up with being treated like I will explode at any moment. That alone will drive me to it. Not toward those you are trying to protect, but at you. Treat me normally, not like a mental case, and we'll get along fine." I looked back and forth between Terry and Gabriel as I spoke. Terry was quiet for a few seconds, then turned to Bill with one brow raised. She's got a bit of an attitude. How are her talents? So far strong. I already knew about her dominant personality. What remains to be seen is how ambitious she may be. Bill spoke to him as if I weren't standing right in front of them. I ignored that they weren't talking to me and put my 2 cents in. Not ambitious enough to try to take your position from you, if that's what you're worried about. I have no clue how large the pack here is, and while I don't want to be at the bottom, I have no desire to be responsible for everyone else either. Bill turned to me and smiled. It's a big responsibility, not one to be taken lightly. I've never seen you as possible Electo, or even Harmonia material, anyway. You've always been more loner than leader. Pretty much. My motto has always been, I don't care what you want to do, just don't try to make me do it. My biggest battles have always been with people, whether it be teachers, bosses, or classmates, who tried to mold me into their clones. Gabriel cleared his throat then spoke. If I may, I'd be happy to help Nickie learn whatever she needs to know. However, I reserve the right to determine the risk she poses for myself. To take that away defeats our purpose. Watch it, Bill said, his tone warning. No, he's right, Bill. I laid one hand on his arm. It's his job to decide who is a threat. I can live with that. As long as you don't treat me like a stick of dynamite sweating nitro just because of my situation. Get to know me and judge me for myself. If, after that, you think I'm dangerous, I can accept it, but not before. That's fair to us all, Bill said. He invited the guys to have a seat. I sat back down in my chair and they joined us. I did a lot of listening as they taught me more about pack structure and shared various stories. Some of which were childhood tales told to all kitsune. I paid attention, asking questions whenever I was confused. I learned a good deal about living among the kindred, though I still had a lot left to figure out. I now had hope that this could all become my new normal. It was mid-afternoon when I excused myself, taking some time to get ready for dinner that evening. I didn't want to meet the pack's second in command in ragged jeans and a tank top. At home, I went through my closet, trying to decide on something appropriate to wear for dinner. I didn't feel the need for formal dress, but something nicer was in order. I ended up deciding on a long, flowing black and red print skirt, which brushed the tops of my feet as I moved. I paired it with a clingy red silk blouse. The effect was quite stunning without being revealing or flashy. Because the bright top made me look a little washed out, I had to reapply my makeup. I pulled the hair around my face up and clipped it on top so it didn't hide my face. I left the rest tumbling curls down my back. I slipped a pair of black kitten-heeled strappy sandals onto my feet and decided I was as ready as I would ever get. I wasn't dressed to show off but nicely enough to show respect. Grabbing my purse, I made sure my PCD was tucked inside the small bag and headed out the door. When I pulled up in front of Bill's house, Karen's car was in the driveway. There was a third vehicle parked in the driveway, one I didn't recognize. It was an older SUV, one that I had to admit looked like was in great shape, despite its age. I wondered if perhaps the Lysandros and Harmonia were already here. At the front door, I pressed the doorbell and heard the bell ringing inside as I waited. When the door opened, I was surprised to see Terry. Good evening, Nickie. You look nice this evening. He smiled pleasantly. Thank you, I returned his smile. I thought I could do a little better than this morning's jeans. You certainly did, he said. Come on in. The Electo is busy in the kitchen, and the Aniquitos asked that I bring you into the living room. Thanks. I know the way if you have something else you need to do. Nothing better than escorting a pretty lady, he said. How kind of you. Are the others here? No, you're the first to arrive. Is the truck out front yours? I walked beside him through the house. Yep, she may be old but she runs well. If she's reliable, I see no reason to replace her. True. We passed under the archway between the dining room and the living room, and I saw Bill standing near the fireplace, staring absently out the large window at the rear of the room. He appeared distracted, as though trying to work out the solution to a problem. Is something wrong? Has something happened? I stepped closer. Hearing my voice so close, Bill seemed to snap out of whatever thought he had been lost in, and he turned, smiling. Nickie, don't you look nice? Are you ready? Is something wrong? You looked worried, I asked. No, nothing's wrong. I was just enjoying the view while thinking a few things over. He turned back to the window and gestured toward it. I had to admit, it did provide a stunning view of the mountains south of town. I moved next to him so I could share the view. It's a great view this time of year, isn't it? I couldn't tear my eyes away for a few minutes. Especially in the evenings while there's still light to see while you relax before or after dinner. I never tire of it. Bill turned his attention to me. Can I get you something to drink? I'm good for now, thanks. Karen will be back in a few minutes. She just went to check on dinner. Have a seat, make yourself at home. Hank and Alexis will be here soon. I chose one of the chairs near the fireplace and sat. Bill took a seat on the sofa beside it as Karen walked into the room. Nickie, I'm glad to see you, she said with enthusiasm. I stood and hugged her before sitting back down. I love that skirt, it's just stunning. Thank you, it's one of my favorites. I smoothed the skirt down my legs just for an excuse to run my hand over the silky fabric. It looks good on you. It's somehow just perfectly you. She took a seat next to Bill and leaned against his side. Have you been practicing finding your center and visualizing your shields? Yes, ma'am. At least twice a day, more if I have the chance. Good, the more you practice, the better your shields will be. Have you had any thoughts leak or picked up any stray thoughts since we started building your shields? No, but I haven't been out much. The only time I've spent around anyone but Kindred was a quick stop at the grocery store. No rush, keep practicing and pay attention when you're around people, see how well your shields are working. When you're comfortable with it, you can try lowering your shields, see what you pick up, just as an example on how well your shields are working. I'll keep that in mind. Thanks for your help, really. I would be lost if you two hadn't been so kind and understanding. Think nothing of it, Nickie, Bill said. Your family, we could do no less. Speaking of family, have you thought about when you might want to tell your parents? I've thought about it, but I don't know. I'm not ready to tell them yet. I don't know when I will be. That's all right. You don't have to tell them if you don't want to. I think you'll find the longer you wait, the harder it will be, and I think you're going to want to tell them in the end. I know. I probably should, but I can't handle it right now. I'm doing okay dealing with things one day at a time. By taking each hurdle and change as it comes at me. I don't worry about what might be around the corner. This is how I've dealt with this so far. But when I start thinking about what to say to Mom and Dad, how to tell them about this, I end up having a panic attack. Let me get used to it before I tell them, at least. The more I know, the better I will be able to answer their questions, and I know they'll have questions. Fair enough. You've done amazingly well handling everything that has been thrown at you in the last week. I don't want anything to compromise that, so I'll let you decide when you're ready. I'd like it if once you've decided, you'd let me know. I told you we'd help and I meant it. Our conversation was interrupted by the peal of the doorbell. Neither Bill nor Karen got up. Instead, Bill said, "Terry will get that, he's playing butler for the evening." A moment later, Terry escorted a couple, not much older than me, into the room. They were nothing like I had expected. I was expecting an older couple, closer to Bill and Karen's age. Neither of them was more than a few years older than myself, and that surprised me. I stood to greet them as Bill introduced me from where he remained seated. Nickie, this is our Lysandros, Hank Jeffries, and his wife, our Harmonia Alexis. Turning, he addressed them. Hank, Alexis, this is Nickie Daniels. She goes by Nickie. You know, now that I think about it, I think the only time I've ever heard anyone use her full name was when she was in trouble. He smiled fondly in my direction. It's nice to meet you. Hank stepped forward to shake my hand. A strange current of energy ran through my body as our hands touched. Not quite an electrical shock, but not much different. I had to look up several inches to look him in the eyes. He was at least 6 feet tall, if not a little over. Hank was muscular and well-defined without being bulky. His dark hair was cut in a short men's style that had been popular for decades, and his deep brown eyes seemed to look inside you and be able to tell what secrets you were hiding. So glad to meet you, Nickie. Alexis smiled as she shook my hand. She was a couple of inches shorter than me, and slender and beautiful. Something about her size and graceful movements made me feel oversized and clumsy. Her shining blonde pixie-cut hair flattered her angular face, and her large green eyes caught and held your attention. She reminded me of those classic tiny film stars. It's nice meeting you both. I tried to keep a smile on my face to hide my confusion. Bill looked past the group of us to the man standing in the doorway and spoke, "Thank you, Terry. You're free for the evening, if you'd like." "Thank you, sir, but with all 4 of you in one place, I'd rather stay if you don't mind. Just in case. I'll stay in the other room unless I'm needed and leave you to your evening." Terry waited for a response. "Very well," Bill said before looking at Hank. "Have a seat, you two. Hank, I mentioned over the phone when I invited you over that Nickie shifted suddenly last week." The couple sat on the love seat, positioned on the opposite side of me from the sofa. Hank nodded. "I remember. I asked you both to come meet Nickie because, as you know, she wasn't raised among us and she's still learning the pack hierarchy. She needs to know who the leaders are and who to turn to if she has a problem. She's comfortable with Karen and I, as I've been a friend of her father's since before she was born. I want her to know who she'll be turning to for help in case we can't be reached." Alexis turned to me. "Is it true you had no clue what you were until you shifted last week?" "None," I said. "It's still pretty new, though I'm starting to get over being stunned. I'm doing my best to get it all figured out." "I wanted you to meet Alexis for another reason, Nickie. She's the only member of our pack who can call animal forms, and after what you told me this morning, we should see what she can teach you. I'd like you to get to know her a little, see if you can work together so she can train you." Alexis turned to me with a surprised look. "What makes you think you have the ability to call or restrict animal forms?" "Well," I started, "yesterday Brandon and I—" "Brandon?" "Brandon Stone. He's been my best friend for years." "I see, continue." "Anyway, we were out on a run. He told me that is what it's called when you go out and run around in wolf form." "It is," Alexis nodded for me to continue. I recounted the day before from the beginning of the rundown to when he'd come around the car and demanded to know why I'd kept him from shifting. She nodded. "I see. It appears you might have the gift to restrict animal forms at least. I'm willing to work with you to develop it. We'll see if you can call forms too if you want. However, you're going to need to get past the squeamishness of seeing people naked. Most of us don't care to keep losing clothes from shifting in them, and it isn't often convenient to find a changing room. I understand why nudity is casual among the kindred. It's going to take some getting used to, though. It's not anything I've ever been exposed to. On top of all the everyday reasons for it, most of the calling and restricting of animal forms that I do is medical related. That means, if I'm going to teach you to control this talent, you'll need to be able to handle blood and sometimes extreme and very emotional situations. Blood doesn't bother me. I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters. Someone always had one kind of wound or another, and we all learned to deal with the injuries we gave ourselves and each other. Very well, I'll give you a try. Where do you work? I'm the dean's secretary at the college. You work Monday through Friday? Generally, but not right now. For the summer, we're on a 4 days a week, 10-hour days schedule. Oh, that will make it easier. Mondays or Fridays off? Fridays? Is there any reason why you can't spend at least part of your Fridays helping me out in our clinic? You have a kitsune clinic? I was surprised. How do you keep humans from coming in and finding out about us? It's not officially a clinic or any kind of business. I run it out of the guest house at my place. We've converted it to be used as a doctor's office, and we do what we can. There isn't a huge call for a kindred clinic, but we get a few walk-ins a day. Broken bones, torn muscles, random injuries. It would look strange for our people to turn up in a doctor's office with an injury that would normally take weeks to heal and then hours or days later be fine. That would be a problem, I said. So I run the clinic. It's mostly for non-emergent cases, but we have a couple of doctors who we can call if we need, and an EMT too. The clinic's not entirely my responsibility, but since it's set up at my place, it's easiest for me to staff it a lot of the time. What do you think? Can you spend your Fridays with me for a while? I don't see why not. It would probably be a good opportunity for me to meet more of the pack too. I liked Alexis right away. She was friendly and she didn't treat me like a child, like some do to people my age. She was kind without being patronizing. I wasn't so sure about Hank. It wasn't that he was patronizing or spoke down to me, he was just quiet, making it harder to know him. He had spent the time that Alexis and I made plans watching me, as though he was trying to figure something out. I did my best to ignore it while occasionally stealing glances at him, trying to figure out what he was up to. He seemed reserved, as if he hadn't yet made up his mind about me either. And I admit that the strange sensation when I touched his hand was still on my mind, but I didn't know what it might mean. Hank seemed like the opposite of Alexis. She was outgoing and engaging to his quiet and reserved. Have you had any other talents emerge yet? Hank asked. We've learned that I'm telepathic in both directions, but that's all so far, I said. I'm working with her myself on that, Bill put in. Karen's been working with her on shielding, since she's one of the best in the pack and Nickie knows us both already. Hank nodded and continued to listen to us talk. His silence was a bit intimidating. I tried to ignore it and continued the conversation as if he wasn't watching me. After we had been talking a while, Karen excused herself to check on dinner. She was gone for a few minutes before she reappeared to call us to the table. We all moved into the dining room and started to take our seats. Terry reappeared and Karen followed him into the room. It was a nice evening, and after dinner, we visited a while longer. I got the Jeffries address from Alexis before I left for the evening, so I knew where to be Friday morning.